Good morning. Welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. And uh, this morning we are going to have the opportunity to study Psalm 48.
Get a little louder. Okay.
Like usual, we'll begin with reading the psalm out loud to hear how it sounds, both in the original Hebrew and also in a couple of different translations. And what we're thinking about for our first read through is what is the emotional impact of this psalm on you? What rises up as you read these words? Is there a is there a couple of words that you can use to describe the theme of this psalm? And based on that idea, based on uh the idea that you're of the emotional impact of the psalm, is there a way that you would use it in your own personal spiritual practice? So, we'll start by reading the psalm out loud, Psalm 48. Let me share my screen so you can see as I read. All right. Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. Gadol Adonai umhulal me'od, Be'ir Eloheinu har kodsho. Yefeh nof mesos kol haaretz, har Tzion yarkatei tzafon, Kiryat melech rav. Elohim be'armenoteha noda lemiskav, ki hine hamelachim noadu avru yachdav. Hema ra'u kein tamahu, nivhalu nechpazu, re'ada chazatam sham chil kayoleda. Biruach kadim tishaber oniot tarshish. Kasher shamanu kain ra'inu. Be'ir Adonai tzivaot, be'ir Eloheinu. Elohim yechoneneha ad olam. Selah. Diminu Elohim chasdecha bekerev hechalecha. Kishimcha Elohim kain tilatcha al katzvei aretz. Tzedek mal'a yeminecha. Yismach har Tzion tagelna benot Yehuda leman mishpatecha. Sobu Tzion v'hakifuha, sifru migdaleha, shitu libechem lechela, pasku armenoteha, leman tisaperu ledor acharon. Ki ze Elohim, Eloheinu olam va'ed, hu yenahagenu al mut. A song, a psalm of the Korahites. God is great and much acclaimed in the city of our God, the holy mountain, fair crested, joy of all the earth, Mount Zion, summit of Tzafon, city of the great ruler. Through its citadels, God has become known as a haven. See, the kings joined forces, they advanced together. At the mere sight of it, they were stunned, they were terrified, they panicked. They were seized there with a trembling like a woman in the throes of labor, as the Tarshish fleet was wrecked in an easterly gale. The likes of what we heard we have now witnessed in the city of God of hosts, in the city of our God. May God preserve it forever. Selah. In your temple, God, we meditate upon your faithful care. The praise of you, God, like your name, reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with beneficence. Let Mount Zion rejoice. Let the towns of Judah exult because of your judgments. Walk around Zion, circle it, count its towers, take note of its ramparts, go through its citadels, that you may recount it to a future age. For truly God is our God forever, who will lead us evermore. All right, let's look at the King James Version. A song and a psalm for the sons of Korach. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation, the joy of all of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. God is known in her palaces for a refuge. For lo, the Kings were assembled, they passed by together. They saw it, and so they marveled. They were troubled and hasted away. Fear took hold upon them there, and pain as of a woman in travail. Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind. As we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God. God will establish it forever. Selah. We have thought of thy loving kindness, O God, in the midst of thy temple. According to thy name, O God, so is thy praise unto the ends of the earth. Thy right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion rejoice, let the daughters of Judah be glad, because of thy judgments. Walk around Zion, and go round about her. Tell the towers thereof. Mark ye well her bulwarks, consider her palaces, that ye may tell it to the generation following. For this God is our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even unto death. All right. So, first reactions, impressions. What is the feeling that you have in this psalm? Mark.
My first my first reaction was that somebody is certainly trying to get on God's good side. And my second reaction when you just read it was at the end reminds me of sounds like a real estate agent.
Nice. All right. So, first, it's a psalm of praise, right? It starts, God is the Lord and much worthy of praise, right? God is great and much acclaimed. And it is an upbeat, it has an upbeat tone of praise of God. And so that's a first reaction. It's an example of a psalm of praise. And the second reaction is it reads a little like a an advertisement for the city of Jerusalem. Very much like if you were trying to sell the city of Jerusalem as a house to a potential buyer. Come, take a walk around, see the ramparts, see the walls. This is a city which has scared away armies. Like, I'm going to show you all the good things about Jerusalem. It's on a mountain. It has really great vistas and right. And so there is this definitely a sense that this is a psalm of praise, not just for God, but for God's choice of Jerusalem as holy city, right? This is it's a way of praising the city as a way of praising God, and certainly the a large portion of this psalm is a psalm that seems to be like you might maybe use it if you were visiting Jerusalem and you wanted some, you were like, I really need a poem to set the stage for this moment where I'm visiting this city. Maybe you would pick this psalm, an ancient author's uh, uh, praise of the city of Jerusalem, and you might find some similarities to what it feels like to go to the old city of Jerusalem even today. Nice, a great start, Larry.
I agree with the praise and admiration of the city, but it also has the sense of you may not actually be in the city right now. You may be at prayer in an isolated place, and you're having an experience of the presence of God and the power of God and his bulwarkness and the great towers that he puts up. And the sense of presence almost seems to be a mystical presence that you're experiencing as sort of a hyper reality.
Great.
It's not to deny it could also be obviously Jerusalem, but it just took me on a switch immediately into a mystical experience of contemplative prayer and experiencing the power of God and the protectiveness of God and how you are absolutely invulnerable to the enemies, anything they do to you because of the protection of the Lord.
Nice. So Larry points out he didn't say this explicitly, but I'm gonna extrapolate from what he said. Larry points out that this psalm, like many of psalms that we've looked at, has a one Selah right in the middle of it, and there's kind of an emotional turn between the beginning and the first half and the second half of the psalm, sort of marked by Selah, which we've talked about is a word that sort of creates emphasis, or maybe is a musical notation for a musical interlude, or whatever it means. It has some sense of uh of pointing out a shift in the psalm. And certainly here, right, the first half of the psalm has this um description of the military might of the city of Jerusalem. And then immediately, in your temple, God, we meditate upon your faithful care. The praise of you, God, like your name, reaches to the ends of the earth. And this fits right in with what Larry was saying about how the psalm has definitely aspects of praise of an actual physical city, but it also has this, and there's an emphasis because of the word Selah, this sense of spiritual bulwarks and a spiritual foundation, a spiritual connection with God, right? That says, in your temple we meditate, right? The psalm is also a meditation. It is also, for sure, it's praise, but it is about God's beneficence, about God's goodness, about how the strength and power of God can can stand uh in a spiritual way in addition to in a physical way.
Zola.
All right, other first reactions.
Well, I
I've
think,
got one.
Okay,
Oh, go ahead.
Barbara and then Murray.
Um, I at first I feel real awe at what how God is being presented. And then it feels as though after Sela, the second part of that is an exclamation point. Um, in that it's possible to see God in the details of our world, in um in the majesty of the things around us, in Jerusalem, in our mountains, in many things. And that's how I would use it, I think.
Nice. All right, so there's a way in which this psalm, it gives an opportunity to acknowledge not just the um sort of human built wonders, like a beautiful city, but also the natural world's wonders, like the mountain. And there's a possible use of this psalm in describing when feeling a sense of awe. This psalm definitely reflects that awesome power. Murray.
no, my reaction was that the the composer of the psalm is in a deeper or higher level of spiritual state. It is an expression of such great exaltation. It is not merely a praise of God, but it is a complete embrace of all that God stands for, whether the physical, the spiritual. I don't know if I've ever been in that state, but it's almost a person who's lost in a evangelical type of adoration.
Murray says there's something ecstatic about this psalm. something
Mhm.
something of sort of a spiritual loss of control or a spiritual overwhelm of being completely subsumed in God's strength and God's bulwarks and God's dominions, almost like a loss of self, right? There many psalms that we've read are about the psalmist and the psalmist's struggle and the enemies in the psalmist's life and the connection that the psalmist has to the words. And here, the psalmist is almost completely absent. I mean, even when we have sort of a first person uh, 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 phrase, it's a first person plural. The psalmist subsumes himself or herself in a community that is connected to God. What we have heard, we have now seen. Um, uh, and then at the very end, the psalmist, this is like maybe the only place where the psalmist comes out of hiding a little bit, is when the psalmist talks directly to the reader of the psalm, right? Like, go take a walk around the city. Feel that sense that I'm describing here so that you can also tell it to the next generation. But even there, you don't really see the psalmist. You see sort of yourself reflected in the psalm. The reader is more of a character here than the
Mm.
than the poet. And that is different from many of the psalms we've looked at, where the first person speaker of the psalm is a really important part of the experience of the psalm, and I think that Murray's point that this psalm sort of has a sense of ecstasy is um, can also be found in this sort of literary point that I'm making, that the tense of this psalm, that the speaker is absent. There's the the person is lost in God's greatness and grandeur. And I think there's something really powerful about that too. One thing that we so far have not mentioned is the sense of continuity that is uh, a part of this psalm, and I think it's very much connected to this idea of community, of the of the sub the way in which the individual is subsumed into the we, both right before the word Selah and right at the end of the psalm. So both stanzas of this psalm have the same uh essential ending, which is that there is a preservation both of the divine and of the divine city forever. And the the psalm ends with, you know, the reason why you should walk around Jerusalem is because the physical city may not exist forever,
Mm.
but the memory of it will, if you can recount it to a future age. It is a very powerful uh
Mm.
Mhm.
message
Mhm.
that, like, the that it's our responsibility to continue to pass on that the memory of this city, or the memory of the that feeling of being connected to the divine bulwarks, the divine citadels, the divine ramparts, that can be passed on from generation to generation, because God is truly our God forever. God will be with us forevermore. Alba.
Okay, this is going to sound, I don't know if it's going to sound facetious or not, but everybody here old enough to remember Ed Sullivan Show?
No, I'm
Sure.
too.
Yeah,
I'm much too
yeah.
young.
Not Robbie Raffi, but the rest of us, yeah?
Yeah.
Remember the night the Beatles showed up?
Yep.
Oh my God, it was like screaming fangirl, multiplied by a billion. It was so incredible. And that whole thing with, I remember when John got shot, remember? And there were two colliding feelings. One of them was, oh my God, the Beatles will never get back together again. And the other one is, oh my God, John just got shot, those two. And I'm not sure how to weigh those two out. But that idea that the Beatles will never die, as far as I can imagine, and that whole idea of being of even with that huge television we had, it was enormous. It was like a console. And I remember watching this in black and white and my sister going crazy, screaming fangirl. She was, the president of that club. And it was just so incredibly fantastically wonderful. The other thing I think of is the television show Vikings. Has anybody seen that? I don't know if you have or haven't, but there's one episode of that called Uppsala. Uppsala in Sweden is where they went for every 9 years, or 9 years. They went there for the seven sacrifices, one animal from each of the different groups. One of those groups was human. And as they're walking up the hill going towards Uppsala, when Uppsala shows on the horizon, everyone is in that thing, the part to the person in the throes of labor. They were all like so excited to look at this place. Where is that? Verse 7 or something? Yeah, verse 7. They were seized there with a trembling like a woman in the throes of labor. Why do we see that so often? Why do we have to listen to woman in the throes of labor? That's like everywhere, every time I turn around, I'm bumping into that line. But the thing is, lots of people feel ecstasy about a lot of stuff. And seeing for the first time, when I was 8 years old, we went to Times Square. Oh my God, that was incredible. So I don't know, has anybody else had that same feeling of actually having lived this kind of throes of the labor, that kind of feeling of, oh my God, this is really, really cool. It will never die. And it didn't. The Beatles still exist. I don't know if they still do sacrifices at Uppsala, but the whole Beatles thing. And anybody else have that feeling? That's what I felt when I read this.
I feel that
Okay,
when I
so
pray.
Barbie's with me. At least somebody's with me on this.
Mark.
I just want to break for a second and welcome Mishka back to our group. I haven't seen her in a while. I hope you're home now.
I'm home now. All is
Great.
well. Sorry for
Wonderful.
the cat going back and forth, but that's being home.
Yep.
Thanks.
We're
Thanks for
glad
the welcome.
we're
I
glad to
appreciate
have you
it.
back. We
Yes.
are. And
Thank you.
also, if you weren't in shul this Shabbat when I
I
mentioned
was.
when I mentioned Mishka's wonderful, exciting news, I'll just quickly share with you that Mishka was picked by the New York Council of Arts to perpetuate her craft by having the money, the ability to hire an apprentice to learn Mishka's art form, which is Jewish paper cutting, and so we'll be able to pass on the paper cutting skills to an up and coming artist, and certainly we support uh, the New York Council of Arts choice and decision, and we think it's really, really thrilling for Mishka to be able to do this. What a great
Totally.
opportunity.
Well, thank you for saying that. It is a great opportunity. I'll just say I haven't had to hire somebody. She's my apprentice, and I'm the mentor, and that part really makes me feel very powerful almost.
Cool.
And I'm really,
It's cool to get an apprentice.
yeah, that sounds
Like
better.
leveling up in your artistic
Thank you so much for that
Yeah.
commercial message. I appreciate it enormously. I really do. And you can't see, but I'm blushing.
It's very connected sort of to the sense that the psalm has of the importance of perpetuation. Let's jump into some looking at how the psalm is used in our liturgy. So you might know this psalm because it is the psalm for the second day of the week, the psalm for Monday. And so this is the second psalm that we have looked at that is used as a psalm for the day. The Jewish tradition has uh, 7 psalms that are recited at least once a week, and we read Psalm 24, a while back, more than a year ago. But Psalm 24 was the psalm for Sunday, and I did put in here that we will eventually see Psalms 82, 94, 81, 93, and 92, which are the Psalms for the rest of the week. But Psalm 48 is the Psalm for the second day of the week. The Talmud relates that these Psalms have been associated with those days of the week since temple times, when the Levites would sing them each day on the steps of the Beit HaMikdash, on the steps of the temple. And we uh we still remember that, because before we read the Psalm of the day, we say, Hayom Yom Sheni b'Shabbat. Today is the second day in the week, the second day until the next Shabbat, right? The second day of the week. Shebo hayu Leviim omrim b'Beit HaMikdash. That the Levites used to say this psalm in the Beit HaMikdash, and the way that the rabbinic mind reimagines the temple times. And we have, I think it was true for the late Second Temple period that it was like this, but we have like differing traditions for what the First Temple period was like, what the early Second Temple period was like. That is to say, the rabbinic imagination of the temple is very informed by the last 50 years of what the temple was like. Which is fine. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Like, that's the part that was in the living memory of the earliest rabbis. And so, but the imagination that they have is that there are basically 2 groups of priests in the temple. There are the Kohanim that have a descended from Aaron status, and the Kohanim, their job is to offer the sacrifices, and they do so in silence, right? Other uh, unlike other sacrificial traditions in the ancient Near East, where there were incantations and prayers that had to be recited in conjunction with the offering of the sacrifices, there's a rabbinic idea that our sacred worship, the sacrificial rite itself, was a sacrifice, was a sanctuary of silence. Again, like I said, that probably has some historical accuracy at some point in the temple sacrificial system, probably right toward the end of it. It is not clear that that was always true. So the Kohanim, the Kohanim's job was to offer the daily sacrifices and to offer the special sacrifices the uh for the festivals and for Shabbat and all of that. And then there was a broader class of priests called the Leviim that were that were still in the tribe of Levi, but not direct descendants from Aaron. And the Levite tribe, that Levitical class, they were some of them were the caretakers of the temple, and some of them were the cleaners, the janitors of the temple, and some were the ones who opened the door in the morning and locked the door at night, and some of them were the musicians that played the music in the temple. And the Levitical group was, at least in the rabbinic imagination, provided that spiritual music. So when you imagine the Levites reciting these psalms on the steps leading up to the temple, that the reason why they're on the steps leading up to the temple and not in the temple itself is because the rabbis imagined that that was a sanctuary of silence. Nothing, no one spoke there inside. But leading up to it, there was music. And I think one of the sort of tragedies of history is that we've lost the music that is associated with these psalms, right? Clearly, the psalms have musical notations as part of them, right? Like the word Selah, but we don't have what that musical what the interlude actually was or what it sounded like. The Levites, they definitely played musical instruments, the lyre, the harp, the lute, the flute. Um, they also sang in chorus. There are definitely psalms where you can tell that the psalm was meant to be sung sort of responsively or in chorus or with a harmony of voices. And so okay, so we're imagining the Levites singing on the steps of the temple. And so the Talmud in Masechet Rosh Hashanah says, about our psalm, the Talmud says, on the second day of the week, what psalm would the Levites recite? The psalm that begins, "Great is the Lord and highly to be praised in the city of our God, his sacred mountain," right? Our psalm, Psalm 48. Why Psalm 48? This is what the Talmud relates. This is because on the second day of creation, God separated God's works, dividing between the upper waters and the lower waters, and ruled over them as king. And this psalm speaks of Jerusalem as the city of the great king. So this is this is a a passage from the Talmud that explicates why Psalm 48 was chosen as the psalm for Monday. Now, before you heard that this psalm is relating to God separating the right, like the things that the first chapter of the book of Genesis describes as happening on the second day of creation, the separation between the waters above and the waters below. Before you heard that, right, would you have said that this psalm connects to the idea of separation between waters above and waters below? Well, I'll tell you, nobody mentioned that when we were discussing our first reactions to the psalm. I will say that I think the psalm does have a clear two halves to it, right? With the word Selah in between. And so in that respect, maybe the first half is sort of a waters above and the second half is a waters below. And there's something to that, I think. And I think there's a way in which the city of Jerusalem is associated with waters above and waters below, because the Talmud, the Jewish literature, imagines Jerusalem as being both, and this goes to what Larry was saying, being both a physical city, which we call Yerushalayim Shel Mata, right, the earthly Jerusalem, and a divine city, a spiritual city, which we call Yerushalayim Shel Mala, sort of the heavenly Jerusalem. And the Talmud has always thought about Jerusalem as existing in both spiritual realms. There's an upper Jerusalem and a lower Jerusalem, a sense of an eternality of Jerusalem that is separate from the physicality of it itself, right? Jerusalem will always be God's city because Jerusalem is a divine. There is a Jerusalem Shel Mala, a Jerusalem in heaven, that is a reflection of, and also our Jerusalem is a reflection of. They reflect each other. And so I think this association, right, of Jerusalem with the second day of creation relates to this idea that Jerusalem is a city both of the waters above, the heavenly waters, and the waters below, the earthly waters. And so to me, that is why Jerusalem gets associated with with Monday, why this psalm, the psalm for the second day of the week, why this one is associated. I think it has to do with this feeling that Jerusalem is a bifurcated city. I mean, a city with two levels to it, which connects, I think, to this idea, right? It's not just about the city that you can see. It's also about the eternality of the city as a metaphor for the divine strongholds and the divine ramparts and the divine bulwarks. So I put in that some people, it's not in our Siddur that we use, but some people have the custom of including in the Shabbat Musaf prayers a section which deals with the daily incense offering at the Ketoret, and that passage, the liturgical passage that mentions the Ketoret, which we have the introduction line to, that's still in our prayer service. We never deleted the introduction line, but we did delete the passage of the Ketoret. You know what I'm referring to? At the end of Ein Keloheinu, after we have this hymn where we praise God as being like nothing else, then we say this weird line. I mean, it's weird in our book because it's not connected to anything else, where we praise God as being the one to whom we offer the ketoret, the incense. And that line is actually an introduction. The whole piyut Ein Keloheinu is actually an introduction to the reading, the liturgical reading of the daily incense offering. And the conservative movement took the incense offering out, but left the line that introduces the incense offering, which feels to me like it's like pointing to something that isn't there. It's a very strange liturgical choice. Like, why not also take the line that introduces it out? But whatever. So that passage also includes the listing of the daily psalms, right? These are the psalms that were read in the temple by the Levites, and then it goes through on the first day this psalm, and on the second day this psalm. So the first real verse of our psalm, the verse 2, Gadol Adonai Umal Ma'od Be'ir Eloheinu Har Kodsho, that line appears in some in like in an Orthodox Siddur or more traditional Siddur. It appears in the Musaf in the section where it mentions the psalm for the day. So you would just read that first line, but you would know it refers to this whole psalm. All right. So before we go on to other liturgical uses of our psalm, what do you think of this idea of the Jerusalem above and the Jerusalem below, and connecting this psalm to Monday because the second day of creation is about dividing the upper and lower waters? Or if I just told you this is the psalm for Monday, like, why would you think that this psalm had been chosen based on the emotional resonances that we talked about? Why would you think that the rabbis thought that, or the Levites in the ancient temple thought that this would be the right psalm for the second day of the week?
That's a hard question.
I guess, probably the Levites didn't have the like rough association with Mondays that we have in our contemporary culture. But I sort of feel like there's a response to Ugh Monday in this psalm, that has to do with the sort of that sense of awe, that sense of praise, that sense of upbeat. Like, how can you feel Ugh Monday when you look at the walls of Jerusalem, when you imagine God as a fortress, when you connect to this sense of awe, the sense of praise of God? Like, lifts you up. But of course, for most of the ancient world, Sunday, and certainly in Israel even today, Sunday is not like Sunday is the first day of the week, not Monday. So our contemporary American association with Ugh Mondays is very informed by living in a Christian country. Yeah, Mishka.
I was thinking in some ways the same thing about Ugg Monday, but in a different way, that Shabbat was 2 days prior, and now we're still wanting to hold on to the feelings that we have had on Shabbat, and to remind ourselves that it's not just one day of the week that we have these wonderful feelings about or nearness to God, but that it happens throughout, hopefully throughout the week. I don't know the following Psalms, but that it really um, keeps our spirits up. That's sort of my thinking.
Nice. Larry.
I think also that moving from the spirituality of the Sabbath, the Shabbat, to the world, it's a reminder that the divine comes with us, and everything we do has both a physical concomitant and a spiritual concomitant. That we live in both worlds.
Nice. Nice. Right? Jerusalem exists in the waters below and the waters above, but so do human beings.
Yes.
Right? Every person has moments of elevation and moments of the opposite of elevation, right? Every person lives in a world that has a rakia, right? A firmament that separates some aspects of our being. Yeah, nice. Verse 2 is it's used in an anthology of verses in the penitential prayers on Tzom Gedalia, which is the fast of the fast that commemorates the assassination of the last Jewish governor of Judea. Always occurs on the day after Rosh Hashanah. The verse 7, Re'ada chazatam sham chil kayoleda. This idea that Alba was saying is, it feels like this idea of trembling in pain and awe and fear is connected to that sense of pain, that the worst kind of pain that you could imagine in the ancient world was the pain of childbirth, still the case in many parts of the world today. And so that phrase, that verse is paraphrased or alluded to in the most famous prayer of the High Holy Day season, the Unatane Tokef. This is the great and awesome day, and everybody is trembling, and the angels are described as trembling with fear, right? Chil ureada yochezun, dread and fear shall seize them. They're trembling there with fear. That those words, chil and reada and yochezun, right, are the same as the words chil, reada, and achazatam in our verse. So was this supposed to be an allusion to this psalm? I don't know. Like, was it just that they wanted to describe trembling and that those are the words that mean trembling? But it feels like there's a sort of a connection here where when the angels are being described as trembling with fear, the same words are being used as are being used in verse 7. And later on in that same prayer, and when I found this second one, it made me feel like very much like it was intentional, because if you're going to cite from the same psalm twice in or if you have something that looks like it's being cited from the same psalm and you have it a second time in the same prayer, then it probably was intentional. Like the person who wrote that prayer was looking at this psalm, or was relating to this psalm. Anyway, the verse 11, Kishimcha Elohim Kain Tilatcha, right? Like your name, God, your praise is like your name, is paraphrased in or almost exactly the same words, except left off the word God. So paraphrased here in the same Unatana Tokef prayer Ki kishimcha kain tilatecha. For as your name, so is your praise. And so I definitely think, finding two of these like gives uh a strong sense that the prayer of the Unatana Tokef is connected to this psalm. So next Rosh Hashanah, when we stand and open the ark for this prayer for the Unatana Tokef, and everybody is standing at attention, and you hear the Chazan say, Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom. You can also have before you the Psalm 48 and see how it feels to be thinking about the ramparts of Jerusalem and the awe and the that sense of praise and sureness of God's justice, right? And think about that. Like that is a prayer which is imagines God standing there with a book open, the book of life, and is your name going to be written, or are you going to be written for death? And it goes through all the different ways that you could die in the year, right? Are you going to die by fire or going to die by water, right? Are you going to be at peace or are you going to be troubled? Are you going to wander or are you going to be at rest? The the that that fear that is perfectly balanced by the confidence and the surety of God's strength and God's bulwarks, and our psalm, which says that God's love and justice is in God's right hand, right? Your right hand is filled with beneficence. We meditate on your unfailing love, right? the psalm is all about God's willingness to set aside that, right? It doesn't talk about sin explicitly, but it talks about God's love and God's faithfulness and the eternality of that. And so I think using verses from that psalm in our prayer about our anxiety about like what the future year is going to hold for us, it is just an incredible statement of faith. It's going to be okay. It almost seems to undermine the anxiety of the prayer. Similarly, about the physical beauty and the spiritual beauty, right? The meditation that the Koren Tehillim recommends that you say before saying Psalm 48 is what makes Jerusalem beautiful. The mountains which surround her, the ramparts and towers which can be seen from afar. Eyes don't see what makes her beautiful. Hearts feel her beauty. Hearts know loving kindness. Hearts rejoice. Hearts find solace in God's guidance, even unto death. Right? So the inner beauty is more important than the physical beauty. Rabbi Richard Levy writes, "This is surely a psalm to be offered when we are visiting Jerusalem. It suggests that we look upon the walls and towers of the old city and Mount Zion as symbols of the power of God, who reigns over the clear blue sky above and the troubled earth beneath, even as God has embraced us intimately with a covenant of protection and of Torah. So many wars have raged across that city. So much pain bloodies its soil to this very day. And yet the city remains, the ancient towers remain, and we, God's ancient people, remain. Rulers who sought to claim the city for themselves in the end failed, and all eventually lost their empires. But the prophets make it clear that while God has promised us the land of Israel as an eternal gift, we are entitled to dwell on it only insofar as we act justly, and do not lord it over others as others have lorded over us. To look at the ancient towers of Zion as evidence of the power of God, not the power of human beings, is essential if we are to be just guardians of the city and the land that God has deeded to us. Isaiah proclaims, "Woe to those who join house to house and field to field until there is no place for any but you to dwell in the land." Amos reminds Israel that God cares about other peoples as well as Israel. To walk about the towers of Mount Zion is to remember not only our God, the God of the covenant, but that this is also the God of all the world, who judges us as well as others. And if we are not in Jerusalem, how do we perceive this dual aspect of God's nature? In part, we need to see the towers in our own landscapes as evidence of the power of God, who knowingly or not inspired their builders. In part, we need to see the structures of nature, a stretching seashore, low-lying hills or majestic mountains, a single autumn tree gleaming golden in the sun, as the places God has created in which to encounter us. When we enter a synagogue, when we open a prayer book or close our eyes in prayer, we allow ourselves to fill with the presence of God who loves us, who desires us, and who wants to make our hands filled with justice, as does God's. And we need to share these experiences with our children and our students, that they may understand God's presence in the world throughout all time and space. The Levites assigned this psalm to the second day, our Monday, on which God separated the higher from the lower waters and created the firmament. The Talmud sees the double praise of God in verse 2, great is Adonai and greatly praised, as referring to this division of the waters in two, and referring to the God who made this division as a ruler. If it rains on a Monday, we would be advised to bring out this psalm and use the first and second halves of verse 2 to praise God, who has gathered rain in the heavens and caused it to fall upon a thirsty earth. Well, I think that's really beautiful. Then I included a little note here about the last two words of the psalm, al mut, which are very confusing. You'll remember that in the previous psalm, it was that's almost that exact same word was at the very beginning. Almost that exact same word was at the very beginning. Sorry, Psalm 46, not Psalm 47. Psalm 46 begins, Lamenatseach livnei Korach al alamot shir. Alamot, on alamot. So a lot of people think that alamot, in that context, is a musical notation. You should play this on the alamot scale, or you should play this on the alamot musical instrument, or whatever alamot means. But it's weird to have a musical notation at the end of a psalm. That is an unusual thing. But it could be, but again, we don't know. It could be that the alamot was like that there was a sella in the middle of this psalm with a musical interlude, and then there was supposed to be an alamot ending to this psalm. Or it's possible that originally this psalm was connected to Psalm 46, and that you played the alamot at the beginning of Psalm 46 and then again at the end of Psalm 48, that these are connected psalms. It's possible. No one really knows. A lot of people translate this as until death because al mut means on death. But if it really wanted to be until death, it should be ad mavet, not al mut. Al mut is the wrong preposition for the word death. Mut means death, but al is not what you would say. If you wanted to say until death, you wouldn't use the word on. You would use the word until. And there is a word in Hebrew for that. And the word al isn't really used that way. So you can see in our comparative translations that different folks translate it different ways. Evermore, even to the end, eternally, even unto death. They're using the translation of Almut as being about death. An Elem is a young child, so one possibility is to translate it as God will lead us as one leads a young child. That's what Rashi recommends. Will always guide us. will be our guide to the death, guide us even unto death. One translation just translated it, God will lead us all moot. I like when translators do that. It's like, I have no idea what this is. But I actually think that what they're doing here is they're trying to make it seem like it's that musical notation. God will lead us all moot. All moot is a here, like you can understand that as referring to a musical note. Like the word itself has no meaning separate from as it is an instruction to the players to play a particular way. God will lead us forever. And so I brought this note that says there are three basic interpretations. Right, JPS says meaning of Hebrew uncertain. So it could mean having to do with death. It could mean uh having a musical notation, or it could have the same sense as le'olam, and so which means forever. And so you saw that each of those translations picked one of those three options. All right. Any closing thoughts, questions, reactions, comments? Murray.
I just think on this issue of Almut, that if we assume that this was all chanted or recited in a state of ecstasy, when the life and death would have no particular distinction. It would be one continuity for the end of time, till the end of time.
Nice. Other thoughts?
But I love your teaching.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you to study this psalm. It will definitely mean something different to me when I encounter it every Monday in my prayer service than it has in the past, right? Having done this deep dive into this psalm, and when you encounter next Monday when you're at Shachrit and you hear the psalm for Monday, now you'll be able to think about how it connects to to Jerusalem, to a sense of awe, to what it means to begin the week conscious of the importance of a continuity of transmission, of that sense of where you can interact with the divine bulwarks anywhere in the world, where we ourselves are a Jerusalem above and a Jerusalem below, and our connection with God is awesome and powerful, and hopefully eternal. We will not be meeting next Tuesday, the 14th of January, because I'm going to be at the Rabbinic Training Institute, the RTI, just a really wonderful opportunity for rabbis to do some continuing education, some learning for myself. So I look forward to being there. I'm not going to miss any Shabbats, but I am missing our Psalms class next Tuesday. But we will meet, hopefully, as long as everything goes the way that it should go. We will meet on Tuesday the 21st, and I'm going to try to get the source sheet done before I leave for the conference. So you'll get it early, hopefully, and so I'll have a week to look at it before we meet on the 21st. Yeah, there's a funeral tomorrow, so I'm not 100% sure if I'll be able to get it done, but I'm hopeful. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Let's go.
Thank you.